It was a deliberate trick, yes, to appropriate the word gender, which progressive forces had been using to advance human rights, to take that word, empty it of any substance, and then give it their own meaning. And they can redefine what gender means or doesn't mean and give it a negative connotation.
Welcome back to The Right to Decide. I am Sophie in Veld. In the last episode, we spoke about the battle for abortion rights, the first right to be granted and the first right to be attacked. Today, we'll zoom out to the broader anti-gender agenda, because across Europe we see ultra-conservative networks against gender ideology, as they call it. There are attacks on abortion, contraception, sex education, LGBTI rights, and even academic research. And this is not a spontaneous change in public opinion or values. It's a coordinated strategy to roll back equality and autonomy. And I'm particularly pleased and proud to welcome today's guest, Neil Datta, the founder and executive director of EPF, the European Parliamentary Forum, and the leading expert on anti-gender movements. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you.
Let's start with the question, what is actually meant by gender ideology?
That's a good question. Gender ideology is something that exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Gender ideology was born out of the thinking of Catholic thinkers and intellectuals in the late 1990s and early 2000s in order to try to understand and explain what they considered defeats that took place at international level when several UN conferences recognized the concept of sexual and reproductive health and rights in 1994 and 1995 at big conferences on population development and women. Okay, this recognition paved the way for 2.5 decades of advances in human rights, in gender equality. For example, recognizing that FGM is a crime, or recognizing that rape within marriage is a bad thing, as well as access to contraception, abortion, LGBT rights. This was seen as a defeat by these conservative forces, mainly by the Vatican and other Catholic thinkers. And so they needed to explain why they registered this.
Was it only religious forces? Or what other forces are at play?
It was primarily religious forces. They were the origin of this. And they explained this defeat as a result of gender ideology. So they gave a name to it. And once you have a name, then they were able to identify who are the protagonists behind this. Have the feminists, the LGBT lobby, the secularists, and maybe dark forces linked to Soros and internationalists and people like that. And once you have a name and you've identified the enemies, then you can strategize around.
Do you think that this term gender ideology, are they also not using, the term gender, which was actually also used by the pro-choice and the pro-equality forces? Wasn't it also a trick to use their own terms?
It was a deliberate trick, yes, to appropriate the word gender, which progressive forces had been using to advance human rights, to take that word, empty it of any substance, and then give it their own meaning. And by doing this like this, they can redefine what gender means or doesn't mean and give it a negative connotation. So that what they have deliberately done in several countries is to use the English form of the word gender to give it to give it the impression that it is some form of foreign imposition onto national and local cultures.
And why is it? I mean, what is it they want to achieve, and how is it that it became such an incredibly powerful tool for mobilizing people and building political forces?
Well, what they want to achieve is basically to halt human rights progress in certain areas, usually which conform with the social doctrine of the Catholic Church, and then this has been taken up by other religious groups. And then since then, other actors in society, such as far-right political parties, have joined the party and have also seen that there's an advantage in limiting human rights in these areas, specifically by jumping on the bandwagon of labeling something as being part of gender ideology. So we can see that that's been one of the attempts that they've tried to
So, do you think that they're also using this as a to play on the fears of let's say the proverbial middle-aged white male who feels that maybe he's losing power? Is it also that? Is that how they mobilize?
Yes, I mean what these groups have been able to do is identify genuine fractures in society, okay, which exist and reappear or new ones appear. They've been able to identify those and then exploit these by inserting the notion that gender is the root of their problems. So that, for example, with the pauperization of the middle classes that has been taking place in many democracies and economies, they seek to blame this on the advancement of women or certain minorities, whereas it's in fact an entirely different economic and social process that's taking place. But they're able to play on this using the word in its English form, gender, rather than genre or other linguistic variants. They play on the notion that this is a foreign import, either from the UN or Brussels if you're the EU, and that this is going to undermine the national traditions and sovereignty of different countries and society.
So, what do you think is the biggest danger here? What is happening? What is being threatened at the moment?
The number of human rights that we thought we had gained are up for grabs once more. Another danger is that these protagonists who are advocating against gender equality and using gender ideology as a tool to make advances, a certain number of them have allied themselves with anti-democratic forces. So that we see now that this is really part of the toolkit of anti-democratic far-right political parties. And then a third and final danger, I would say, is that progressive pro-democracy forces, by and large, haven't figured out what is happening yet. And we know that these groups, they are strongest when they are able to strike in ambush. And so we need to become aware of what is happening, what is the game that we're all playing here, in order to be able to mount an appropriate defense, both of human rights in the specific areas of gender equality, but also democracy more broadly itself.
Do you think that something like, Roe v. Wade being overturned in the United States, in other words, the right to abortion, legal right to abortion being eliminated, do you see that happening here in Europe? Is there a risk?
Yes and no. I mean, the lesson that we have from what happened in the United States with the overturning of Roe versus Wade is the main lesson we need to draw from it as Europeans, is that the idea of a continuous and long-term investment in taking over the courts and the judiciary system, which is what happened in the United States, is a strategy that pays off. So we can expect these groups to try to do the same thing over here in Europe. And we can see that they've made some very significant inroads in both Poland and in Hungary. And other countries are possibly up for grabs. And that from these two national bastions where they were able to get a certain base of power, they then try to export that to Europe. For example, during the previous peace government of Poland, one of the candidates for the European Court of Human Rights was the founder of an anti-gender organization in Poland. He had to be rejected, etc. But we can see that their ambitions go beyond simply the national level. So that's one lesson that we need to take from the United States, that the judiciary is our legal system is a target for their activism. Another lesson that we have is that this goes beyond simply abortion rights. So abortion rights is one of the targets, but it's much broader than that. Abortion is one issue, human rights in terms of reproduction, sexuality, but also democracy more broadly. Because we can see that aside from simply decisions on the Dobbs ruling, the overturning Roe versus Wade in the United States, there's a number of other rulings from the U.S. Supreme Court which also undermine certain aspects of democracy. I think we need to see the whole thing together not just isolated within specific silos. We're interested in abortion or LGBT rights. We need to see the whole package of different human rights and how this fits into liberal democracy.
Because I think the elimination of abortion rights, for example, is sometimes sort of introduced in the slipstream of a broader political program. I don't think that the majority of Americans, voted deliberately for Trump in order to get Roe v. Wade overturned. That was not the point. It was just...
Exactly. And I mean, in fact, the last opinion polls I saw in the United States is that there's a greater number of Americans that support the right to abortion than ever before. But the overturning of these rights still happened. And then what we saw with more recent elections is that even though it did mobilize a certain voter to come out and vote a certain way in order to protect abortion rights, this had a certain limited impact in time, and then voters went back to other priorities. In terms of abortion rights specifically, one thing that we do know is their strategy in the medium to long term in Europe. And that strategy is a threefold one. What it is a strategy first aiming to prevent abortion, not the way you and I would aim to prevent abortion, which is increasing access to modern contraception. They mean preventing abortion by creating obstacles between a woman and her legal access to abortion, such as crisis pregnancy centers, which disinform women, fake hotlines, etc. After prevention comes restriction. So little restrictions, such ultrasound, not making abortion available under certain conditions, gestational, which are very, very precocious. And then finally, prevent, which is more or less what they've achieved in Poland, and they have this in Malta. So prevent, restrict, and then prohibit what they're trying to achieve.
Okay, and you already said in conclusion that the progressive forces, I mean, you don't even have to be progressive, in order to be in favor of sexual and reproductive health and rights. You just need to be reasonable, I think. But we may be underestimating the threat. We're going to come back to that in future episodes. So, Neil, thank you very, very much. I think we have learned that there is a deliberate and very well thought through anti-gender strategy at work here. And in the next episode, we're going to look at how is this strategy being funded? Where does the money come from? Follow the money. I'll see you again at the next episode of The Right to Decide. Thank you very much.